It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a nigga on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. We got a great show for you tonight. Very excited to be back here with you tonight on Thursday. We have a lot to talk about tonight, lots to get into, big show. And our featured story tonight, once again, we're talking about the war in Iran. It is now day 13. Day 13, everybody. 2-week war in Iran. We'll actually have officially made it into the third week, entering the third week tomorrow at midnight. So this is not, as we were told, a 4-day war. That was initially the claim from at least one of the papers, The Times. We're entering the third week, and we have some brand new developments about it. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. I know we touched on it briefly at the end of the show last night, and we talked about some of the dynamics there. There's some new developments that are maybe less important, less interesting. I think you sort of understand already the situation. And the situation is that we have gotten ourselves into an attritional economic war that we cannot win. A short war, we can do. If it's a few days, if it's 1 week, well, we win that one. As the administration has said, it's very asymmetrical. For us, it's very easy. We have superior weapons. They're more precise. We have more firepower. We have absolutely, in basically every domain, degraded Iran's military capabilities. Their navy, their missiles, their air force, their command and control. It's all been significantly weakened. However, now that the war is entering a third week, the nature of the conflict has changed. I think, again, everybody's sort of up to speed on this. Iran has predictably closed the Strait of Hormuz. There's something funny about this. It's funny because everybody knew this would happen. This is only the most predictable outcome. And for those that have not followed this conflict for decades or years, this has always been actually the critical part of that conversation. If you go to war with Iran, they will strangle the Strait of Hormuz. If that happens, you have a global recession. That's a fifth of all the world's oil that moves by sea is going through this narrow, very narrow choke point. And there is nothing, basically nothing that we can do to reopen it, literally short of regime change. Although we are capable of destroying Iran's bigger weapons, we are not capable of destroying every missile system that they have. We are not able to prevent them from launching missiles or laying mines or even using smaller vessels, unmanned naval vessels. And so as long as that is the case, this is now the dynamic. Either we win the war decisively and we get Iran to stand down and unconditionally surrender, or it's a regime change, or the strait is closed forever. Or at least far longer than we are able to tolerate, or the global energy markets are able to tolerate. And the situation we find ourselves in now, apparently, the U.S. military did not anticipate this. So this is only the most predictable aspect of the conflict. Some aspects of it are unpredictable. Some of them are unquantifiable or unforeseen. This one you had to know. You had to know. You attack Iran, you get the Strait of Hormuz closed. We have a report out today that the U.S. military actually did not know this would happen. And I don't know how that's possible. It's actually a little bit suspicious. But I'm reading today that according to sources from inside the Pentagon, it says that the U.S. military underestimated. So they knew it would happen, but it says the military underestimated Iran's willingness to close the strait. What does that mean exactly? It's hard to know because you had to know this was going to happen. As we enter week 3, this is having a profound effect on oil prices Before the war, oil was trading at less than $70 per barrel. Now the market's closed over $100. It got up to $120 over the weekend, but that was not, I guess, during regular trading hours. Now, today, the market closed over $100. And by the way, this is after we have gone out of our way to relieve pressure on energy demand. A couple days ago, Trump announced that he was releasing 270 million barrels of oil from U.S. strategic reserves, which are being drained again. We drained the reserves after the 2022 war in Ukraine began. Trump tried to build those reserves back up as oil prices came back down. We are draining them once again. And it is after this news. It's 271 million from us. It's 400 million from the International Energy Association. After the news that all this oil is now flooding the market from strategic reserves, oil prices remain high. And that's because everybody around the world knows this is going to be a long-term problem. And the worst aspect of it, the realization is setting in that even if or when the Strait of Hormuz opens back up, things are not going back to normal. Just as the 1973 Arab oil embargo caused persistently high energy prices for many years, it's going to be the same situation here. You got hundreds of ships stuck on the wrong side of the Persian Gulf. It's going to take a long time to get them out, even with a naval escort. And then once those ships get out, you're still going to have production slowed down. There's going to be other structural problems. And now, all across the world, firms and corporations and governments are pricing in that increased risk because of the crisis that just unfolded. So there's going to be lasting effects, and there's really no way out of it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll kind of pick up where we left off yesterday. We're also going to talk tonight, to me, this is the biggest story, about a speech from Benjamin Netanyahu earlier in the evening. And this might actually be a good sign. So we've been covering the war for the past 2 weeks, and kind of the big outstanding question is what exactly is the goal and what's the plan? Because it's very confusing. And Trump is not giving us any clarity. It seemed that when the war started, we were pursuing regime change, which is very specific. That is what it sounded like he was saying. And I said that on my emergency broadcast, not last Saturday, but the week before that, the night that the war, I suppose it's the night after the war started, I said that unambiguously, Trump was declaring war on the regime. Because the speech went like this. He said, Iran has harassed us for decades, basically since they started to exist. After the revolution, they took American hostages. A few years later, they killed hundreds of Marines in the Beirut barracks bombing. They killed U.S. soldiers using IEDs during the Iraq War and the global war on terror. And Trump said this is a pariah state, they got to go. What's more, he also said that people need to take to the streets in Iran and rise up against their government when the military operation is over. That is regime change. That is what that is. Now, as the war has progressed, it seems that that is not going to happen and is probably actually impossible. And maybe less likely. It was more likely before the war started. In January, you actually had protests. You actually had something resembling an uprising. Now you got nothing of the sort. And not only is that not happening, but people are rallying behind the government as opposed to against it. So what exactly is going to happen? Well, we're not going to drop enough ordnance or bombs on the country where the regime is no longer in place. It's entrenched. It actually enjoys more support now. So if a regime change doesn't happen, then how are we going to achieve that? Ground forces, nuclear weapons? If you seek an unconditional surrender, how do you continue to escalate? Because it seems like your only options are unacceptable to the American public and maybe even to the U.S. government. Maybe they're not even actually feasible from a logistical or practical point of view at all. So then the only logical conclusion is that we're seeking an off-ramp. We got into this hastily, without a plan B, maybe without even a good plan A. How do we extricate ourselves from the conflict without looking weak? few days ago, Trump came out, and this is, again, mixed messaging, but there's some positive signs here. Trump came out and said, well, we won. We won. We destroyed their military equipment. We destroyed their military. We killed the leaders, and we're close to winning, or we've basically won, or we're ahead of schedule. He's indicating that he is ready to wind the war down. Unfortunately, as we know on the show, Trump is not exactly in complete control, or even in control at all. The real decider and decision maker, the one who controls the tempo of all of this, is Israel, and Netanyahu in particular. Here's the good news. This is our big story. Today, in a speech/press conference, Netanyahu came out tonight and he admitted there's going to be no regime change. He basically conceded the point and said, I don't think there's going to be a regime change. He actually said, I don't know. He said, but even if we don't get it, even if it's unlikely, he said, well, at least we weakened Iran significantly. This is shaping up to be perhaps the mother of all tacos, the mother of all Trump always chickens out. Launch this war with these big maximalist ambitions. We're going to do regime change. We're going to hit them harder than ever. We're going to completely wipe them off the map. And then after 2 weeks, they basically win. That is what is happening. They are winning. The regime has survived. That's a victory. They are still capable of launching missiles at the Gulf countries and Israel and U.S. assets and oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. That's another victory. And they are inflicting so much economic pain, not just on the global economy, but on our local partners, that it's forcing the United States to reconsider. And that is the ultimate strategic victory. So it's looking like Iran may actually win this engagement. I don't know that they win the war, and I think that surely if they survive, it is a Pyrrhic victory. If this is a strategic victory, if you can call it any kind of victory at all, it is certainly a victory that has come at a cost, and that cost will be paid down the road when we inevitably return. But it seems like Iran might have actually survived, and if the United States and Israel are looking for an off-ramp, it's a strategic victory for them. And that's good news for the Goyim. That's good news for the whole world. So we'll talk about that. That is going to be our coverage of the war. Before we get into it, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the show. Remember to check out our merch store, which is back online, Fuentes.store. We got our... This is all the way over here. We have our America First hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, flags, mugs, pins, buttons, everything like that. It's all on the website. If you want to support the show, subscribe at americafirst.plus. $15 a month, you get access to the archive. That's every episode of the show. $100 a month, you get the group chat with me, and that includes exclusive content. I'm dropping voice messages in there every day and giving you some behind-the-scenes stuff, some insider information. And I'm just generally hanging out and chopping it up with the fans. Mixed feelings about that, but, you know, it's part of the job. That's why we do it. That's why when I go into the group chat and I see everybody's smiling faces and they love the show, that's the real reason I get up every day. You know what it is, though? I go into the group chat at like 4 a.m., and I always get like the 4 a.m. crowd, and they're fine. But not for nothing. Maybe you get a different crowd at like 8 a.m. Maybe you get a different crowd at like noon, 1 o'clock. Maybe you get a different crowd when it's the lunch rush as opposed to the people that are on a voice chat until 3 a.m. on a weeknight when it's a work week. Just joking. I'm just ribbing those guys a little bit. They're good guys. But that's AmericaFirst.plus. Check it out. With that, we're going to dive into the show. Before I get into the news, did you see Brylan Hollihan calling me out earlier tonight? And I tweeted at him right before I went live. This guy has been really on my case. I don't know what his problem is. I don't even really talk about him that much. Other people do. Other people attack him pretty frequently on Twitter. And I don't really care about him. I don't really see him as a person. I don't really know what's going on there. When I see Brylan Hollyhan's face, I just sort of think this is how the Jews see all of us. When they call us goy, that is what they have in mind. That is the mental image. That's the dictionary definition photo of a goy. That's someone looks at Brylan Hollyhan, a Jew looks at Brylan Hollyhan and says, that guy's going to flip the lights on and off for us on Saturday. That guy's going to tape the refrigerator light bulb off. You know how that works? So we can open the refrigerator on Shabbos. Like, I'm sort of getting it. And so I saw this on Twitter. He calls me out and he goes, people that are telling you to stay home in the midterms, they just want to destroy everything. Why don't you try to build something and be responsible? We're not going to win by being trolls. And you know what I noticed about the video if you watch it? So this is actually my most recent reply. If you go on Twitter and you check my replies, this is my most recent tweet. If you watch the video, which is addressed to me, it's clearly written by ChatGPT, which is actually disturbing because you imagine this is a guy who's in his college dorm room telling Grok or Claude or ChatGPT, write a script condemning Nick Fuentes about voting Democrat. And you want to know how you know it's written by ChatGPT? It's obvious. It's because every other sentence is not this, but this. Not voting Democrat despite the Republicans, but building something lasting for our children. Not trolling and being silly and unserious, but being responsible and building something that will, it's like, and I'm not even exaggerating, watch the video, literally every other sentence is that. Every other sentence is an M dash. Not trolling and being an immature little groiper, but being a principled conservative. Not voting to burn it all down, but voting for jobs. It's like, who are you? Are you like 18 years old? And I said it the other night, I was really getting into this Democrat thing. It's like my new favorite thing. I just knew I had to do it. I just knew I had to go all the way this year. When I thought about this idea, I didn't think about it fully, at least initially. I think I just kind of said it on the show one night. But the more that I think about it, the more that I love it. The more that I monologue about it, the more that I know this is the right thing to do. I just fell in love with this idea. And I said the other night, I was ranting about it basically the entire show for like 90 minutes. And at the end of the show, I said, I will just never be this principled, conservative, Republican, GOP apparatchik. I just don't understand how anybody would want to grow up and be that guy. It's so bad. It's so worse than anybody even knows, than anybody even realizes, even me for that matter. I get some of the inside baseball, and every time I go to Washington, every time I talk to anybody from Washington, they all tell me it's actually worse. They watch the show. They follow me on Twitter. They're about it. They're groypers. And they know how I feel. And as you know, I feel very strongly. And the people that are actually in there, in the administration, going to work every single day in DHS or the Pentagon or State Department or the White House, Treasury, whatever. We have people everywhere. They're literally everywhere. They will all, literally to a man, they all say, no, it's so much worse than you even know. The personnel, the corruption, the level of not giving an F about delivering on things like mass deportations or no new wars. They all say that. And I just can't get behind. I can't wrap my head around the psychology of anybody, but especially a young person going to the mat for this every single day. So I genuinely don't understand it. All I could reply is like, you're just a subhuman. You're literally subhuman. I don't know what the fuck you are, but you are not a human being. You're some 18-year-old white college kid, and you're doing these like ChatGPT pro-Republican videos for boomers. If that were me, I would want to kill myself. And not to be, I know that's not like a very Christian thing to say, but seriously, if I had my like Alabama University polo shirt on, and I had my like ghostwritten book about like being conservative or whatever on a shelf behind me. And I was doing Fox and Friends on Jesse Waters' show for baby boomers. I'm going to like the villages in Florida to give a talk about voting Republican. And you're 18 years old? I would just, what kind of life is that? Who would want to live that life? Who would choose that over it? You could be anything. You have free will, okay? It's like a video game. You can do whatever you want. You could be at Hustlers University. You could be in the real world. You could be like Andrew Tate. You could be one of these people that's like drop shipping. You could be one of these people that's pimping OnlyFans girls. You could be trying to trade shit coins or stocks, or you could do a Chat GPT rapper and make an AI business. Like you could literally do anything. You could be a Groyper. You could work for James Fishback. And you chose to be like, he's making tweets about Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh? Didn't he die before you were even alive? Like, what are you talking about? Who's doing this? So I had to break the mold because I was clearly maybe trending toward that at one point. Like when I was in high school, maybe I was going in that direction. And then I took a sharp right turn. I took a far right turn in college. But anyway, it's just kind of an interesting foil. He's not really all that interesting as a guy, but it's an interesting foil, the compare and contrast. I don't know where they're making these people. I don't know where a person like that is created, but it's pretty freaky. I don't understand a person like that. I just don't get it. But anyway, that's my most recent engagement. Very strange. But with that, we are going to move on. We're going to get into the show, and let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz first. We'll go over a little bit of what we talked about last night. And like I said, the state of the war is, as you know, the longer it drags on, the worse it gets for us. And look, in a way, I sort of fell for it. In the opening stages of the conflict, when the war started, it looked like it was very one-sided, very asymmetrical. And I said in the early stages, we are obviously winning this conflict. We're winning the war. As it stood, as it was in that opening weekend, in those first maybe 3 or 4 days. But again, understanding the conflict means you have to understand the weapon systems that are being used, the tactics, the strategic objectives. The war only works for America if it's quick. We have better weapons, but we have fewer of them. And it's not as easy to make them. America's not an industrial power anymore. We don't make the weapons. We don't make enough of them. Our adversaries are the complete opposite. They make tons of weapons, and their weapons are not precise. They're dumb. You know, our weapons are smart. They're AI. They're connected to satellites. They're very sophisticated, but they're very expensive, and we don't make enough of them. Russia, on the other hand, makes 4 million drones a year. 4 million drones every year, and it's native. Iran makes hundreds of thousands of drones, and they actually design them too. We stole their drone design, their Shahed suicide drone. We just copied that model, reverse engineered it, and made one of our own. And that's actually what we're using in this conflict, although we just have far fewer of them. We're looking to buy drone interceptors or even drones themselves from Ukraine. Again, we don't make them. So this is fundamentally the nature of modern conflict. In the era of the Ukraine war, now in the era of the Iran war, you have these big advantages that the great powers think that they have, like Russia going into Ukraine obviously has a manpower advantage, has more equipment, has more money, has a bigger industrial base. And they go in hard and fast, thinking they're going to topple the government and achieve their objectives. There's actually some striking similarities there. And what they then find is that they are ground down by the enemy's defensive capabilities. And it's sort of inverted. In Ukraine, America was supplying all of these defensive weapons for Ukraine and defensive fortifications and intelligence and the Star Shield satellite system. In Iran, it's the reverse. We are now encountering offensive capabilities, actually, which is ballistic missiles, which are very cheap, drones, which are very cheap, mines, unmanned naval vessels. And these are creating a porcupine-like effect and making it extremely complicated to fight the war. So we came in as the vastly superior power, again, with more weapons, more sophisticated weapons, much larger country, thinking that all we had to do was hit Iran hard and then they would fall over. If that doesn't happen, you're in trouble. And that is how the war, as you know, has been playing out. Trump and Israel, in concert, hit Iran with everything they had. We bombed them over 1,200 times in the first 24 hours. We killed their supreme leader. We sunk their navy. And they had already been severely weakened and damaged in the first war a year ago, back in June. And it wasn't just Midnight Hammer, which is the U.S. strike, the one-and-done B-2 stealth bomber strike. It was also Israel, which a year ago pounded them over 1,000 times and destroyed not just some of their nuclear facilities, but also missile launch platforms. They also destroyed a lot of regime targets, not just the IRGC, but also the Basij. So Iran is already in a weakened state. They got hit with everything the U.S. and Israel have. But now we're entering the third week tomorrow night. And again, those core strategic objectives of the United States have not been achieved. The regime has not collapsed, has not toppled, and there is no sign that it's going to anytime soon. How did we actually arrive here at the end of February, now the middle of March? Well, the timeline was sort of interesting. The whole idea for this conflict began, or I could say that the U.S. began to mobilize for the conflict back in January. And the circumstance in January is that there actually was, or at least there appeared to be, an organic uprising in Iran. There were, according to estimates from Western media, which might not be reliable, there were hundreds of thousands of protesters across the entire country, in every major city, across the whole breadth of Iran. And these protests swelled in size. They went on for weeks. And then the Iranian regime cracked down on them, according, again, to Western media, in an indiscriminate and an extremely violent way. And Washington and Israel were under the impression that that violent crackdown might actually fuel the dissent, might actually fuel the opposition to the government. And so when the U.S. and Israel first considered strikes, it was in a circumstance where you actually had, perhaps, a latent anti-government ground force. That perhaps if the U.S. and Israel destroyed Iranian weapons or scattered the IRGC by killing the leadership, destroying regime targets, then maybe the people could actually seize control of government assets and arm themselves, or seize control of infrastructure or government buildings. And in a word, maybe there would be an opening for there to be some instability in Iran, and maybe, like I said, an anti-government movement actually coalesce and become viable to replace the revolutionary Islamic regime. But that was in January. And the protests appeared to die down almost at the exact same time that we began to ramp up our military mobilization. And by the time the U.S. got all of the assets in place or out of place, by the time we got aircraft carriers and destroyers and half of our Air Force in the Middle East and most of our personnel out of the bases that were not protected by Patriot missile batteries or THAAD systems, the protest had already been crushed, and had been crushed actually a month ago. So we went into the conflict really just wishing for the best. It's actually a head scratcher. And I think that when all of this is said and done, the history books will show that this was a catastrophe. This was just like a completely unmitigated disaster and ultimately an unforced error. A war of aggression, a war of choice that was conducted with no planning, hastily, without a clear idea of an end game, an exit plan. You could even say a plan in the middle. Like there just seems to be, from the beginning until the end, no concrete idea of how this would play out. And so when the U.S. went in, we hit them really hard. And where we are 2 weeks later is that the regime is not just intact, it has totally survived. And now the people have rallied behind it. And the people that have survived inside the regime are now hardliners Who is the supreme leader? Well, it's the former supreme leader's son. His wife was killed. His daughter was killed. His father was killed. All of his colleagues were killed. This is supposed to be the compliant new leader of Iran that is going to be more willing to or likely to engage in diplomacy, that will make more concessions. This is the new government. This is the new regime post-decapitation that is going to normalize ties with Israel. Obviously, it's worse from the point of view of trying to extract compliance. This new Iranian regime is going to be actually vengeful and even more defiant. Not only that, and this is the second aspect of it, in spite of the fact that we've degraded some of their heaviest weapon systems, we sunk their navy, killed the supreme leader, destroyed, according to different estimates, 3/4 of their missile stockpile or missile launch platforms, Iran still maintains the ability to strike U.S. allies, assets, bases, and more importantly, shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. So the regime is intact. It has survived, and it's pissed off. It's defiant, it's angry, it's vengeful. They're not going anywhere. And again, there are 200,000 members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So if you think we killed 12 of them and now it's a chicken with its head cut off, that's not the case. They're always going to have more people that they can promote. And that's because they prepared for this. They knew what this war would be like. They knew how Israel and the United States would strike. They knew our game plan. And so that's why in the buildup to the conflict, they had succession in place. Not just the second man or the third man, but down to like the seventh man, the eighth man. In other words, the United States can kill a lot of the leadership before they exhaust the bench in the IRGC. Clearly, as has been demonstrated by the government of Iran, there is no splintering, there is no dissent, there is no factionalism. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard and Iranian government has rallied behind a new supreme leader. They have rallied against the incursion from the U.S. and Israel, and all we managed to do is piss them off. And the second aspect of it, again, is if Iran is able and maintains the capability to launch missiles, and that's all they need to do. They don't need frigates. They don't need a navy. They don't even need an air force. They don't need any of that. All they need are these very crude and cheap and dumb ballistic missile launch platforms and ballistic missiles, and that is all that they need. Because Iran is a big country. It's a big country with mountainous terrain, with a massive population. And the United States, they've bombed with Israel 3,000 targets. They could bomb 10,000 targets. They could bomb 20,000 targets. Will they have destroyed every missile launch platform? Will they have crippled Iran's ability to make missiles, to make new ones and replace the ones that have been destroyed? The answer is no. They can always source the components because they're cheap. They can always move the missiles around because they're very mobile. They could take them apart and build them back up in another place. And they're always going to have a deep bench of soldiers that are willing to do this. And the more that they get hit, probably the bigger the bench grows. And this is what is happening this week. In spite of everything that has been thrown at Iran just yesterday, there were 3 ships that were hit in the Persian Gulf. 3 ships, and many of them not even in the actual strait. There was one that was hit in the Strait of Hormuz. 2 tankers were actually hit closer to Iraq, closer to the coastline of Iraq and Kuwait. So we are 2 weeks into the war, entering the 3rd week, and you still have the threat of missiles being launched. Strait of Hormuz is like 40 miles long. It's not big. So you actually don't even need a ton of missiles. You only need 3. You only need to hit 1 ship for all the hundreds of ships that are in the Persian Gulf to know that it's not worth the risk to leave the Gulf, that if they try it, they might get hit. There's not a lot of room there. And the threat is still so bad, the U.S. Navy won't even provide an escort. There's been talk in the past week and a half that maybe the U.S. Navy will intervene and you'll have a naval ship escort a chemical tanker, a cargo ship, one by one through the strait. I have something in my teeth. But they won't even do that. Even the U.S. warships are not willing to go through the Strait of Hormuz. It's too narrow. It's too risky. Iran is still launching surface-to-sea missiles. So even after all this talk, and there was talk about the government will provide insurance for the ships. There was talk about the U.S. Navy will provide an escort for the ships. Trump is begging these companies to keep the traffic flowing. Even in spite of this, the U.S. warships won't even go there. Forget about an oil tanker. Forget about a cargo ship. It's totally closed down. What effect is this having now on the global economy? Well, not only do you have the energy supply constrained because of the shipping choke point, so that's 20% of the world's oil that moves by sea goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's a huge energy crunch on the global oil market. But then you also have the effect that this is a pipeline. This is a metaphorical pipeline. So you actually have a flow of oil. It's continuous, which means the oil is extracted, the oil is refined, it's put on a ship, it's sent through the Gulf, through the Strait, to its destination where it is then consumed. Well, it's not just that the oil isn't getting where it needs to go, but it's backed up. The flow of the oil has been backed up, which means that now Kuwait and Qatar and the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they have to fill up all of their reservoirs of oil. All their storage capacity for oil is reaching 100%, which means they don't have anywhere for all this oil to go. There's another problem here. So not only is the oil not getting to where it's intended, but where the oil is being made, now the oil's got nowhere to go. So now all of the largest oil producers in the world in the Middle East, or among the largest oil producers in the world, they're cutting back on production as well. This is extremely costly all the way around to not have the oil go through, having hundreds of tankers stuck. It's going to be very costly to eventually get them out. It's the cost of storing the oil, and then it's the cost of reducing production and then ramping it back up. And all of this is creating inflation. All of this is creating very severe and acute economic problems for a global economy which is already fragile. For example, in the United States, what has been the economic game in the United States for the past few years? It is this tricky calibration. How do we increase economic growth without increasing prices? It has to do with interest rates. We have had chronically and persistently high inflation for a number of reasons. Prices are rising. Prices are getting out of control, as everybody knows. At the same time, job market is cooling off. Businesses are not hiring more people. Those that have been fired are having a very hard time finding new work. I think the median time is like 8 weeks or something. People are out of a job for a very long time. Economic growth might be slowing down. Spending might be slowing down. There's some worrying trends there, some recession indicators. And so the question facing the Trump White House and the Federal Reserve is, if we increase interest rates, or rather keep them high, well, then you're going to tamp inflation down and maybe prices can get back under control, and that will alleviate some of the economic pain for the middle class, working class, people living paycheck to paycheck. But if you keep interest rates too high, then businesses might not want to invest, and then the economy can't grow. And so you have a low growth economy. Even if prices stabilize, then people are still not going to get higher salaries. Maybe there's going to be increased unemployment. Jobs are not being created. So you have low growth, which is very bad if you have rising debt. Because in order to keep up with the pace of the rising debt and deficits, you need to grow your way out of it. Conversely, we're cutting interest rates. Cutting interest rates stimulates investment. People are going to take their money out of the bank. Investors, banks, businesses, funds, they're going to take their money out of the bank and they're going to invest it in the economy. And you're going to grow the economy. You're going to get more jobs. You're going to have more business creation. Maybe you're going to be able to grow a little bit more and get out of the shadow of this mountain of debt. But if you cut interest rates, then you also might have an increase in prices. The velocity of money increases. There's going to be more spending. And if there's more spending, there's more demand. It's going to drive the prices up. This is a very delicate equation. This is what got Joe Biden out of office and ultimately Kamala Harris to lose the election. This has obviously been a sore spot for the president as well. He's not happy with the fact that prices have not completely stabilized or then come down. He's frustrated with the Federal Reserve Chairman, who is reluctant to cut interest rates and, in Trump's opinion, then unleash economic growth. So it's in the middle of this very delicate game that we're playing, where we might actually ultimately wind up with both low growth and high prices, that now you have an energy shock. Energy is beneath everything else. Shipping, transportation, industry, it's all powered by fossil fuels. It's all powered by energy. Everything moves on freight. Everything moves on ships. Everything flies in planes. Industry, households need energy for their electricity, for machines. You have a global increase in energy cost. You have an increase in everything cost. You have an increase in all prices. And by the way, I don't need to remind you, it's a midterm election year. So think about what we got ourselves into. This is the mind-boggling nature of the conflict. We start a war with Iran. Think about these questions that were just maybe never considered or never got a sufficient answer before we started dropping the bombs. We're planning on going to war with Iran. We're looking for a regime change. Now, to get a regime change, you need a ground force. And we know that. We know that you can't get a regime change without dropping, or rather, just by dropping bombs. We go into it determined that we're going to once and for all confront Iran. It will be decisive, meaning that the regime will be defeated and ousted. That's the stated goal. That's the intention. That's actually the strategic imperative. We go into the war thinking we're going to topple the regime. And the war doesn't work if that doesn't happen. Well, we can't topple the regime without a ground force, with air power alone. But we go into it a month after the protests have ended. We start thinking this is a good idea because there's massive protests. Those will be the ground force. If we hurt the Iranian military, well, the people might take their guns or take their assets or overpower them, and then that's your ground force. That's your regime change. So we need a ground force, but we don't have one. We need to win the war quickly, and that means toppling the regime. But we can't do that. We know that the first thing Iran is going to do if we hit them is close the Strait of Hormuz. We have no plan to reopen it. We have no ability to reopen it. We're in a midterm election year. In order to win the midterms or to be competitive, you need to have a stable economy. You need to be popular. Well, this is not only the most unpopular war in history, but it's also raising all prices. It's also actually going to cause inflation. Closing the Strait of Hormuz necessarily means all prices are going to rise. It's going to increase energy prices. That will increase the rest of the prices. And that effect will linger probably for years. And so when you think about all the constraints, there's a logic to all of this. Was none of this considered? Did they not think through any of it? You really have to scratch your head and wonder what exactly was the plan here? What was the goal? Because again, if you need to win a fast war, then you need to topple the regime. If you need to topple the regime, you need a ground force. We knew that none of that would happen. We knew that we weren't going to topple the regime because we knew we couldn't do it without a ground force, and we knew we didn't have one. We knew they would close the Strait of Hormuz. And if we didn't topple the regime, we knew it would be closed for a prolonged period of time. And if it's closed for a prolonged period of time, there's no way to open it up. You can't destroy every missile in Iran. You can't destroy every mine or mine-laying vessel. And if you can't do it more quickly than they can build new ones. And if you can't do it in such a short amount of time that it doesn't have these ramifications. So in other words, this was in a way inevitable. It was inevitable that we would get sucked into a prolonged attritional war that would hurt the economy, that would damage the political prospects of the Republicans. It was inevitable because we knew it wouldn't be fast, because we knew we couldn't topple the regime, because we knew we didn't have a ground force. So what was the logic here? Now, this is the latest from the New York Times about the crisis in the Strait, about how Iran appears to be winning. It says, quote, Iran has begun laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, according to U.S. officials, an effort that could further complicate U.S. efforts to restart shipping there. While the U.S. military said it had destroyed larger Iranian naval vessels that could be used to quickly lay mines in the strait, Iran just began using smaller boats for the operation on Thursday. Again, it's like we go in there bombing their navy, bombing the big stuff. This is our weakness. The current capabilities, the current state of the art of warfare actually favors the defensive side because unmanned vessels, unmanned vehicles are cheap and they're easy to make. Drones are cheap and easy to make. Missiles are cheap and mobile and easy to make. So you can be as big and sophisticated and technologically superior as possible. If you can't destroy every single one of these very tiny, very cheap, very robust weapons, you're not going to achieve your objectives. That's the problem. So we destroyed all the frigates. Well, they just started using smaller ships that lay mines, and we can't destroy all of those. It says strikes have hit multiple vessels in the area, some of which Iran claimed responsibility for. On Tuesday, an Iranian deputy foreign minister denied that Iran was mining the strait. In his first remarks since the war broke out, Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, said in a written statement on Thursday that the lever of blocking the Strait of Hormuz must continue to be used. The new mining effort is not particularly fast or efficient, but the Iranians appear to be hoping they can lay them faster than the U.S. can clear them, and therefore create a further deterrent for ships moving through the strait. The U.S. military said this week that it had attacked 16 Iranian mine-laying ships. So this is the current state of the conflict. And again, it's a head-scratcher because we knew it would go this way. How? One, we knew all this information going in. Two, it already happened. This is exactly what happened last year in June. Almost exactly. Israel started the war in June of last year without the United States. Unlike this conflict, they launched the war in a surprise attack, and they did it with help from inside of Iran. There were missile and drone strikes from inside the country against Iran's leadership. Iran was hit with a cyber attack that disabled its eyes and ears, all of its radar, early warning systems, everything like that. And then Israel came in with the Air Force and they bombed the nuclear infrastructure, regime targets, missile platforms, everything. And they did this for 2 weeks. But within days of that initial strike, Iran fixed all of its cyber problems, got their Air Force off the ground, and then Iran started launching these huge waves of ballistic missile attacks, hundreds at a time. And it didn't take long for these ballistic missile waves and drones and cruise missiles to completely overwhelm Iran's defenses. And what we saw in last year's war is that eventually these Iranian missiles were just slamming into Tel Aviv every single day. And if Iran would shoot down 90% of the missiles or 85% of the missiles, well, if you shoot 100 of them, 15 ballistic missiles are going to get through. And they're going to land in these Western, first world developed cities, killing a lot of people and destroying a lot of infrastructure and causing a lot of problems. And it was during that war that Israel was effectively strangled in the same way as the Persian Gulf. And Israeli refugees were fleeing to Cyprus. It's actually a big problem now. And certain Greek islands. And all of the air traffic over Israel was suspended. People couldn't escape the country. And the economy ground to a halt because people were in bunkers for 2 weeks because they were getting slammed with missiles every single day. And that is ultimately why the United States was dragged into that war. Because only the United States could actually finish the job that Israel started. At that time, the U.S. was not being hit. Our bases, our assets, our other allies were not being struck. It was only Israel. We intervened at the tail end and forced an end to the conflict by bombing Iran and then thereby compelling them into a ceasefire, into a truce with Israel. So in other words, we already lived this. We saw this. We saw the economics. We saw the attritional aspect of it, the resilience of Iran's personnel and equipment, their ability to build lots of ballistic missiles and launch them without Israel meaningfully being able to suppress this capability. Now here we are in the second week, and we've hit Iran way harder than we did last year, way harder. Way more ordnance, more targets, killed more people, destroyed more stuff, destroyed all the big stuff. And yet, just today, Iran bombed the airport in Bahrain. Iran bombed the airport in Kuwait. Iran bombed a bank building in the Emirates. And this is having a huge effect on the oil. Like I said, they bombed 3 ships in the Persian Gulf, so they're choking off the oil. And it's also deeply affecting the Persian Gulf countries, the Gulf Cooperation Council. All these other economies are built on investment, tourism, high net worth individuals, their capital markets, their specialized banking services for developing nations. And many people are now reporting on this, that all of these oil-rich Gulf countries, they were trying to effectively rebrand as modern hubs. We used to think of the Middle East as a barbaric place where this population pyramid of exploding birth rates, very young Muslims were becoming extremely radical and causing terrorism, and they're very low IQ, and so it's creating political instability. That is what we thought about the Gulf maybe 25 years ago. In the intervening decades, the Gulf has rebranded. Think Dubai, think Qatar, think Formula One and WWE in Saudi Arabia. They have rebranded as an entertainment, tourism, banking, finance hub. Well, that doesn't really work if you're getting hit with ballistic missiles at a resort. It doesn't help your image if you've got billionaire businessmen and you've got extremely niche banking services, and these buildings and airports are literally being bombed. They're being bombarded every day by suicide drones and medium and short range ballistic missiles. It doesn't work. So in other words, Iran has forced us into an unwinnable situation. We can't do regime change. It's impossible unless we escalate, unless we engage in a ground war. Otherwise, it's off the table. And if we can't do regime change, we can't stop the missiles, because we can't bomb them into regime change. We can't bomb all the missiles. So the only way to stop the missiles is to kill the people that are firing them and get new people that don't want to launch them. That's off the table. So they say, well, we'll bomb all the missiles. You can't. There's too many of them. The country's too big. They're Zerg rushing us. It's impossible. You can't destroy all of it. You destroy some of it, they build more of it. You bomb one target, they've already moved the missile somewhere else. You kill one guy, there's another guy ready to take his place, and he's angrier. He's pissed off because he liked the other guy. He liked the first guy. And in the meantime, as the days drag on, the economic situation, it compounds. It gets worse all the time. If we can't topple the regime, if we can't stop the missiles, then that means the strait is closed, the energy doesn't flow. The energy doesn't flow, it strangles the global energy market. It increases prices everywhere. It causes panic. And there's a contagion effect. It affects everybody. There's animal spirits involved in this too. Panic sets in. That's why when the Trump administration releases oil from the strategic reserve, it makes the situation worse. You might say, how does increasing the supply of oil make the price of oil higher? Trump unloaded 270 million barrels of oil from the strategic reserves. You would think that would ameliorate the supply shock because we've replaced the supply, so the price should stabilize. It actually causes the opposite effect because Wall Street is watching, and Japan is watching, and Europe is watching, and what they see is that we have unloaded all the supplies because it's a crisis, and there's no end in sight, and the pain is acute and is ongoing. So if we release it, we're communicating we have a big problem. So people are going to bet that oil will remain high for the foreseeable future. It drives up the price, actually. In Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, they're cutting production. Their storage is full. So they literally have to shut down the refineries. They have to shut down the oil industry because the oil has nowhere to go. They could start pumping it into these new pipelines they built in the Emirates and the East-West pipeline in Saudi Arabia. But who's to say Iran doesn't bomb that too? So maybe they're worried about using it. They've never used it to its full capacity. And then what's more, all these countries, in addition to the oil crunch and the revenue they're not getting, all these countries are also being strangled because nobody wants to live there right now. Nobody wants to visit there. Nobody's going to invest in their capital markets in the long term because they don't want to have to make a stop over into a city that's being bombed by Iran every single day. So we are in an unwinnable situation. It gets worse all the time. And in particular, it gets bad for Trump because Trump needs to win the election. And so you have this global energy crisis. It's going to cause a global economic crisis. As time drags on, it gets worse. And as time drags on, we get closer to the midterm elections. So what does that mean? It means two things. You're either going to, one, get an escalation. What's the solution? Well, if we can't stop them because we can't bomb them into regime change, well, what's the obvious next step? What's the obvious escalatory step? Well, we could always do other things that will facilitate a regime change. We could always invade. And so that's option one, is if we're not winning the war, if the bombs aren't working, and if the pain is that bad, well, then we'll send in the armed forces and we'll invade and we'll force the regime to come down. I think you know why that's not politically tenable, but that's something that Trump has said he's considering. Pete Hegseth said the same thing. They could always go in that direction. They could go up. The other direction is you back off and you leave. Well, how do you do that? If you create a truce or a ceasefire and you tell the Iranians, we're going to stop bombing you, will you please stop bombing us? Maybe you bring China in on this. China needs the oil. China's being hurt by the energy crunch. They want to stabilize the Middle East. And China is maybe Iran's most important partner. So maybe the US and China get together at the trade talks in Europe this week, and we tell China that we'll get Israel to back off if China gets Iran to back off, and we could call the quits. We could say it's a truce. We could say it's a ceasefire. Iran will stop bombing the Persian Gulf. They'll stop bombing the Gulf, the GCC countries, and we'll get Israel to stop bombing Iran. The only problem with the de-escalation approach is that how do we do this without losing face? Because in the event that we de-escalate, we need a narrative. Because what we said, again, from the outset is we want regime change, and that's what we want, and that's what we're going to get because we run the show and we're the number one power. Well, what happens after 2 weeks? We threw everything at them and they're still standing. Well, now we look like a paper tiger. That message reverberates all around the world. And the message is the U.S. is not as powerful as it thinks it is. Its deterrent credibility is undermined. We made a threat. Iran did not back down, and we couldn't back it up. We signed a check that we couldn't cash. And so now every other country will realize we should adopt the Iran model. We should have a native drone industry. We should buy ballistic missiles. We should buy Iranian drones. Everybody's watching very closely, and they're taking notes about this. Iran too, Iran itself. They become actually the strategic victor because they thwarted the U.S. objectives. Even though they are absolutely weakened, even though they are significantly diminished and vulnerable, in a way it's a strategic victory because they have reestablished deterrence. The message is communicated that you tried it. You tried to knock us off and you failed and it backfired. We defended ourselves. We're still here. You went in for the kill shot and you missed. The supreme leader is dead. Well, we'll call him a martyr and we'll appoint his son to pursue vengeance. You bombed our missile launch platforms. Well, we bombed your precious oil and we control the energy trade. We vetoed the global economy. That's what they'll say. We let oil flow to China through the strait unmolested, but we refused your oil. We control the global oil market. We control the global economy. You f with us, we put our finger on the button and we shut the whole thing down. You'll think twice next time. That's the message. And it rallies the people to the regime. So if there was any idea in the Western imagination that the Iranian people had this aspiration for liberal democracy and feminism and OnlyFans, and they want to be free of Islamic theocracy, or they don't want sovereignty, well, what effect does this have? If the United States is absolutely bombing the shit out of your country and your government valiantly and bravely defends your people, well, that increases support for that government. The U.S. is dropping thousands of bombs on Iran, literally causing a Category 7 earthquake, a 7.0 magnitude earthquake in Tehran, maybe dropping bunker buster bombs on their capital city. Thousands of Iranians are dead. Hundreds of school children were killed in the first strike. You killed their leader. And if Iran defiantly appoints that guy's son and says, he was a martyr, we're pursuing revenge, we're going to defend our nation. And if they succeed, what does that do other than endear people to the regime? What does that do other than actually create a rallying effect? And the population coalesces around the regime. Probably this is the greatest IRGC recruiting ad ever. Whereas Hamas is destroyed, Hezbollah is destroyed, Jordan's a bitch, the Saudis are a bitch, all these countries are a bitch to Israel. I'll just throw in Qatar and the Emirates so you don't think I'm paid off. The Emirates and Qatar are bitches. They're defenseless. Iran stood alone. That's leadership. That's leadership for its neighbors. That's leadership for its people. So that's a strategic victory. How does the United States walk away from the fight without that happening? They can't really. And this is where you enter the latest statements from Trump and Netanyahu. Trump comes out today, or I should say a couple days ago, and he says, we won. He said, we won, we destroyed all their equipment, we destroyed their navy, we killed their leader, so we won. I'm claiming victory, it's over, mission accomplished. That's what we set out to do. Now, obviously, that's a lie. Because what they said is that they want regime change at the beginning. They didn't get it. They didn't get what they wanted, they can't get what they want, so now they're just finessing it. And they're saying, well, what we really meant is that we only want to destroy their military and go home. We don't even want to destroy all their missiles. We don't even want to destroy their nukes. We don't even want regime change. All we wanted was these little other victories that we got. And that is Trump looking for an off-ramp. That's Trump looking for a way out. That's a way for him to reframe it so he can claim victory. And it's bluster. It's obviously fake, but that's something that they need to say. The obvious question, however, and this is what I said a few days ago, is, well, what about Netanyahu? Because again, Trump, our strategic interest from America's point of view is we want to prevent Iran from getting a nuke, and we want to prevent Iran from disrupting the global energy trade. And nice job doing that. But we don't necessarily need a regime change. We just need a compliant regime. We don't need the regime to be forcibly, violently removed. We just need them to work with us a little bit. Now, does degrading their military maybe get them to make a deal? Maybe Trump was convinced of this, that he could go in hard and fast, blow up a lot of their shit, go home, and then say, hey, well, mission accomplished, and now maybe the Iranians will make a deal because they don't want to face our wrath again. But Israel is the outstanding variable. They are still the uncertainty because Israel does want a regime change. For them, that's non-negotiable. For them, they want regime change in itself. They don't want regime change to make Iran more compliant. They don't want regime change so Iran will not pursue a nuke. They want regime change because they don't want an Islamist anti-Israel government in place. So that was always the question. Will Israel and elements inside the Republican Party and inside the Trump White House, will they allow Trump to walk away from the disaster to cut his losses? Because Israel's not done yet. And that is what was reported the other day, is that there's a divergence in the two policies. That Israel wants the war to go on after the United States exits, because Israel still is not satisfied because they have different goals here. Well, the big story from today is that Netanyahu gave a speech this evening, and he basically conceded we're not getting regime change and it's not going to happen. And that means perhaps that he is assenting to President Trump's off-ramp. He has given permission for the United States to exit the conflict. Trump said on Monday, well, we want it to be over. It's going to be over soon. We're almost done. And he's effectively communicating, this is hurting us more than we're hurting them. We got to leave. If Netanyahu comes out this evening and says, we might not get regime change, and that's okay. That's his way of telling us we have permission to finish. And this is from the Times of Israel. It says, quote, Prime Minister Netanyahu admitted on Thursday that he was not certain the Iranian people would bring down the Islamic Republic once Israel and the U.S. create the conditions for them to do so. He said, you can lead someone to water, you cannot make them drink. Regarding the potential for regime change, Netanyahu told reporters, we will create the optimal conditions to do this, including airstrikes, as we did yesterday, as we are doing these days, to try to give the Iranian people the space needed to take to the streets. We are delivering crushing blows to the IRGC and the besieged, their street forces, checkpoints, and more is yet to come. Nevertheless, he said, quote, I do not deny it. I cannot say for certain that the Iranian people will bring down the regime. We told them help is on the way. Well, the help has come and more will follow. We are all hoping for the result of this regime falling. Ultimately, a regime is ousted from within. However the conflict plays out, Netanyahu asserted the Islamic Republic is already weakened. He said it's simply a different Iran. It no longer threatens as it did before. He said it is not the same power, it is not the giant bully that nothing can be done against and that no one can unite against. So he seems to be admitting the same thing that Trump is, which is we're not going to topple the regime. We opened up a window of opportunity for the people, but they're not taking it and they haven't taken it. He says, however, here is our consolation prize. At least we weakened Iran. At least we degraded their capabilities. And now we've demonstrated that Iran is not untouchable. And obviously that is not what they set out to achieve, but that is their way of finessing it and reframing it so that the two countries can claim victory. And so that sounds to me like maybe we will get a truce. Maybe we will get a ceasefire. Maybe peace will break out. I think that one of two things happens. One, you get a false flag. You get an Iranian sleeper cell that does an unbelievable terrorist attack and hundreds or thousands die. It's a mass casualty event, and that galvanizes the American public and the Europeans and maybe even the Gulf countries to actually invade Iran, and we're in a multi-year war. That's option number one. And that's how you get your regime change. Option number two, they don't give up on regime change. That's not in the cards. But what they might do is a temporary truce, a temporary ceasefire. We replenish our ammunition. We replenish our munitions stockpiles, weapon systems. Maybe we involve other coalition partners, whether that's the Kurds or the Gulf or the Europeans or somebody else. We get a new coalition together, and then we sow the seeds on the ground for a revolution. CIA, Mossad is active in the country. They're getting anti-government forces organized and mobilized. And then in 2027, you get the once and for all regime change operation. We try it again. I think those are the only two options. I think regime change is inevitable. I think that ultimately Iran is going to go. That's what Israel wants. What Israel wants, Israel gets. And unless some kind of black swan event occurs, unless something very strange happens, it seems that we are on an inexorable trajectory towards an Iranian regime change. It's just a question of what the timeline is. Will we get it now or will we get it later? Will we get a ground war with American forces hastily put together in order to save face, not to back down, and we get the regime change now and we're now in a multi-year conflict? Or do we wind it down, we get some space to breathe, chance to catch our breath, and then we go back in a year after we've made additional preparations and maybe we get a better opportunity. Now, the only problem with the latter is that in the interceding time, Iran is going to be able to build more missiles. So look, let's say you get a truce and a ceasefire. Why would Iran stop? They're kind of winning this. Well, they might stop if China asks them to, and maybe they'll stop if they have some assurance that we will stop bombing them. Okay, so we get a truce. Well, weeks will pass, months will pass, and what is Iran going to do? They will seek vengeance. They will build more missiles. They will try to. And what is Israel going to say? They're going to say Iran is building their missiles again. They're undoing the work that we've done. We mowed the grass, it's growing back. And so will Israel then try to initiate more strikes on Iran very soon? Surely there will be a tripwire. Unlike Lebanon or Syria, Iran could simply close the strait again. It's not like these other countries where you can just have open reign over the airspace. Iran is able to actually hurt the United States. So it's not going to be like Syria where you just go in and bomb them when you feel threatened, when you feel like it. There will have to be a durable peace. But within months, Israel anyway is going to claim, look, they built their missile arsenal back. Think about it. The midterms are in November. Could you foresee that in 8 months, Israel will say, Iran has had 8 months. If you do the math, that means they built 2,500 more missiles, and they're all pointed at Saudi Arabia and Israel and Al Udeid and Erbil and all the other bases. They're going to ask for another war again because this is what we're involved in. It's like I said last year. You bomb Iran once, you're in it for good. You've been drawn in. You've bought it. You have skin in the game now. By hitting Iran once, it makes negotiations that much less likely. Once bitten, Iran is going to actually entrench its offensive and defensive capabilities. They're going to build more of them because they know they're threatened. They know they're under the gun. So we bombed them last year. Now they don't want to talk. Also, they're going to build a shit ton more missiles because they know they're going to need them. And if they're building more missiles and they're not talking, it means Israel's going to beg us to hit them again. Now, that brings us to today. We bomb their missiles. It makes negotiations less likely in the future, and Iran's going to build more missiles after we get a peace. So that's why even in the latter scenario, you might think this is a taco. Oh, Trump is chickening out again. Oh, this is the end. Oh, I guess it wasn't so bad. The boots never hit the ground. Just like last year. Yeah, they haven't hit the ground yet. People said last year, oh, it's a 2-week war. No big deal. All we did was drop a couple of bombs and that was it until the next time we bomb Iran. And what are they going to say now? Oh, well, look, all we did was bomb Iran 3,000 times. We never dropped any boots on the ground. Yeah, until the next time we bomb Iran. And then we're going to bomb them again. And people are going to say, well, that was until eventually we get the regime change. And I don't know how we get out of this without a false flag. Because there is no appetite for this war. Nobody wants it. American public opinion will have to turn. There is no Iranian opposition. There's nothing viable there. So it seems that will have to be manufactured at some point to get us to go to war. That's the morbid reality. That is the morbid dynamic that we're engaged in. And that's it. And that is our coverage of the Iran war tonight. Not great. It's a little bit scary. And that's why I said I'm rooting for Iran to win this strategic victory. I saw some people didn't like that. People didn't like that I said I'm rooting for Iran. Let me tell you why I'm rooting for Iran. Some people say, well, I can understand being against Israel, but being in favor of Iran? I used to be like you. I used to think that way. People say, well, they still chant death to America. They're still our enemy. I used to think that too. I'll be precise and specific. Why do I want Iran to hang on here? It's not because I like their Islamic government. I don't care for it. It's not because I'm pro-Iranian. I'm not Persian. I have no affinity with this country at all. The reason why Iran must remain is because the real threat to America is from Israel. It's not crazy. Think of what Israel did to Hezbollah. They put bombs in the pagers. Okay? Now, Israel has infiltrated and subverted America. Everywhere you look, there they are. Billionaire oligarchs, AIPAC, political lobbying, controlling the media, spying on our population. They've penetrated our intelligence agencies, our law enforcement agencies. They are all over our shit. They're on us. If they could put bombs in the pagers in Beirut, in Dahia, what could they do here? And if they could assassinate the Iranian president, which some people believe they did, if they could kill the leadership of Hamas, if they could drop bombs on Qatar, who's to say they couldn't attack America? Or better yet, who's to say they couldn't attack their enemies that reside in America? Like a Tucker Carlson, like an American president that doesn't go their way. Like any government official that doesn't go their way. Israel has 300 nuclear bombs. They are a nuclear-armed state. They want to expand their territory. They've penetrated and infiltrated the highest levels of American society. And if they have no rivals in the Middle East, there's no check on their power. The capital of global Jewry moves from New York City to Jerusalem, to Tel Aviv, to Israel. And the balance of power shifts away from the United States towards the middle. The leverage that they will have over the Strait of Hormuz, over the Red Sea, over the Indian Ocean, over the Bosporus Strait, over the land and sea routes that connect Asia, Europe, and Africa, the Indo-Pacific and Europe, the United States and these other countries. It will be unprecedented. They're the hegemon in the Middle East. They're a global power. All that oil, all that natural gas, all those data centers, all the capital that is flowing into those sovereign wealth funds, all the capital that has flown into those markets in Dubai, in Qatar, all these countries, these are facilities where money is pouring in. All the raw materials there. The aluminum, the copper, the fertilizer, the LNG, the oil, all that stuff, all under Israel's jurisdiction, all under their control. They become a global power. It's not insane to think that down the line in 25 years, you get an American government that is a complete suzerain to Jerusalem, where the American elites actually do answer to Israel completely, because if they don't, they'll be killed. If the Ayatollah isn't safe, is the American president? The Ayatollah is underground in a country fortified by missiles. They have a nuclear hedge. Is our country safe? What if Israel runs ChatGPT and ChatGPT is integrated into the U.S. military? Because ChatGPT, its brains are in Israel. And who is going to be our AI czar? Alex Karp was just named. The guy's an Israel partisan. Alex Karp, head of Palantir, who flew over there with the whole board after October 7th to give them all the Palantir systems, all the Palantir operating system. He's going to be the AI czar. Sam Altman, another pro-Israel Jew, he is going to be running the U.S. military's AI because Anthropic wouldn't do it. Now ChatGPT is going to do it. And it's got its key stuff in Israel also. Everybody in Silicon Valley, for that matter, is tied to Israel. Sean McGuire at Sequoia, the largest venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, he's in bed with them also. So is Joe Lonsdale at the Founders Fund. He's an Israeli partisan. He's getting tefillin wrapped in Israel. That's Peter Thiel's guy. Peter Thiel's Founders Fund is run by Lonsdale. Stanford Review, Peter Thiel founded. It was edited by Lonsdale. And Lonsdale's an Israel partisan, just like McGuire, just like Alex Karp, just like all these people that are running tech, which is increasingly in bed with defense. Tech is in bed with defense. Drones, AI, cyber systems, even the rocket ships. It's all in bed now with the U.S. military. And if Israel has infiltrated the tech companies through Unit 8200, which they did, then they've also infiltrated our military. And if they could pull off a daring operation like a bomb and a pager, very primitive, for Hezbollah in Beirut, what could they do here? What could they put in our software in the United States? or the hardware? What could they do to an American? If they could touch the Ayatollah, can they touch the U.S. president? If they can touch the leader of Hezbollah, Hamas, can they touch a dissenting member of the U.S. elite? So that is actually the number one threat, that a fifth column in the United States will have a nuclear-armed regional hegemon backing them up in the Middle East as a base of operations. That's the bigger threat. So I want Iran to exist as a big counterweight to Israel. That is in our interest. Just like we want balance elsewhere, we're trying to balance India and China. We're trying to, in a way, maybe balance Europe and Russia. We want to balance Israel and Iran. We want to balance Israel and this Islamic alliance. Maybe that's a good idea. Get Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Iran as one big coalition, and maybe they hold Israel in check. So some people say, well, I don't care. I say I don't care if the mullahs die. Well, I fucking do. Because I want the mullahs on the front line. I don't want me to be on the front line. They're on the front line fighting our war, actually. Do you want to know why Israel isn't dropping bombs on you? It's not your turn yet. Okay, in the 70s, they were hunting down the Nazi remnant from the Nazi regime. They were in South America, Mossad, Israeli intelligence. They were tracking down all the Nazi collaborators to haul them to Israel for a trial. And now, then it was Egypt that stood in their way, and they destroyed Egypt. And it was Syria that stood in their way, and it was Iraq, and it was the Palestinians, and now it's Iran. And what happens when America stands in their way? Well, they'll do it to you too. I want Iran. I want Iran to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here. I want Iran to fight the Israelis over there so we don't have to fight their fifth column in the United States. I want Israel to be weaker. So I saw some people didn't really get that. They said, oh, he's rooting against America. America's controlled by Israel. I'm rooting for America. But right now, Iran is fighting for America more than America's fighting for America. America's fighting for Israel. Iran is fighting for Iran. But by fighting against Israel, Iran is indirectly fighting for us. So I pray for the martyrs. I pray for the martyrs in Iran. I pray for their martyred Ayatollah. I pray for their martyred IRGC because they're fighting the war that we are not, that we will not. Who are we fighting this war for? They're not even hiding it. We're fighting it for Israel. I don't blame Iran. I don't blame them even a little bit. Not even a little bit. It's tragic what is happening. All loss of life is tragic. And obviously I pray for the dead Americans that have been killed by this. But who is responsible for the dead Americans? It is the decision makers that betrayed us to a foreign nation and sent American citizens to fight and die, to kill and be killed on behalf of a foreign nation. That's who bears the responsibility. Who bears the responsibility for American lives? The commander-in-chief of the armed forces that sends them into harm's way, and better only be doing it if it's in the interest of the United States of America. Who's responsible for any American dying? Well, their representative, their sovereign, their head of state, their leader, whose job it is to protect the homeland, ensure domestic tranquility, protect against enemies, foreign and domestic. It's our president that needs to be looking out for us, not Iran, not Israel. Who launched a war that we knew we couldn't finish, that we knew would bear casualties, that has no tangible, conceivable benefit for Americans? It was President Trump on behalf of Israel. I don't blame Iran. I don't hold Iran responsible. Iran is not my enemy. I don't want to fight Iran. I don't want to die in Iran. You say Iran is our enemy. Why? They have a different religion? Why is Iran my enemy? Because they oppress their own people? I don't live in Iran. I'm not an Iranian. That's their problem. They're not my problem. They're not killing me. I have a greater risk of dying on the highway because an Indian has a CDL. I have a greater risk of dying because a black person's driving on the shoulder and cops can't chase him anymore. I'm at greater risk of dying on American public transit. than I am because the Iranians went to war with me. We have real problems in this country, real problems that our leadership won't solve. Instead, they send our soldiers not to protect our border, not to protect Americans in our own cities, not to ensure peace on our public transit or public square, but to go and fight Israel's adversaries so they can have as much power and wealth as is literally possible and conceivable for them to have. So who's responsible? Who is the enemy? The enemy is within. The enemy is not, okay, we don't like the mullahs, so we're going to take, a little detour? That's the scenic route? Oh, we'll just bomb them just on. Yeah, well, we happen to not like them. Fuck it, let's just kill them all. No, not my enemy. Iran is not the enemy. Muslims are not the enemy. The enemy is within. The enemy comes from within. And the enemy are the people that have hijacked our government and sending Americans to kill and be killed on behalf of their country. That's the enemy. That's the enemy that comes from within. It's the enemy that tells us we're a melting pot, diversity is our strength. It's the enemy that opened our borders to people that hate us and kill us. It's the people that oversaw the destruction of our cities, riots that forced the cops not to arrest criminals. That's the enemy. The enemy is within. That's who I'm worried about unseating. You want to talk about regime change in Iran? I want regime change in America. You want regime change in Iran? You want an uprising over there? I want an uprising over here. I want regime change here. Make Iran again? I want to make America great again. So I see some of these knuckle-dragging idiot conservatives falling for this. That Haim guy, what's that Christian guy's name? He's like some Christian nationalist. I saw him interview the Asian guy, one of the Asian guys. They all look the same to me and they all sound the same. Nice guy though. But I saw that, I think his name is Matt Haim, something like that. He goes on the show and he goes, I disagree with this take. You're sticking up for the mullahs? No, douchebag. I'm sticking up for America. And, if you didn't just make culture war slop, if you actually did your homework, maybe you'd know a thing or two about this. I've been doing this for 10 years, as I like to remind people every day. Look at the bigger picture. The problem is not foreign aid. We give all this foreign aid money. That's not the problem. They say we're fighting an endless war. Not the problem. Israel's committing a genocide with our tax dollars. Not the problem. None of these things, not the foreign aid, not AIPAC, not the never-ending wars, not the genocide, not the Jewish media. None of these things are the problem. These are a means to an end. All of these things are the mode. These are a means to an end. These are means wielded by a Jewish fifth column inside of our country. Powerful Jews, loyal to Israel, loyal to international Jewry, have hijacked our institutions, are directing American power at their enemies. Hezbollah, Hamas, Assad, the Houthis, Iran, the Shiite militias in Iraq, the IRGC, directed American power at their enemies to degrade them, to destroy them, to pave the way for an Israeli empire, which is meant to be the seat of a global Jewish empire. And the capital of international Jewry will migrate from New York to Jerusalem. And all our Jewish billionaires, all our Jewish leaders, under fire from anti-Semitism and seeing their promised land built up and enriched and powerful, they will move there. And Israel will grow in size, in territory, in population, in wealth, in prestige, in status. And they will go where they can be themselves. They will go where they can be Jewish. And they will have that country, that empire sprawling across the Middle East, controlling the choke points, controlling the infrastructure, the raw materials, the supply chains, the arbitrage between the continents at the center of the world island, the center of the heartland, which is the center of the world island. And they will also have their influence in our corridors of power as well. They will also have their influence through technology, through political connections. They'll also have their people, their viceroy, inside of our government. That's the biggest threat. That's the problem. You think Iran is the problem? You think Muslims are the problem? They're not the problem. They're an instrument, a tool. The real problem is the sophisticated, sinister adversary that is at the core, the nucleus. All of this other stuff orbits around it. This is at the center of it all. And that's what people are not ready for. That's what people might scoff at, go, a Jewish empire headquartered in Jerusalem? Yeah, well, you thought we wouldn't be at war with Iran right now probably too, didn't you? You didn't think they would use October 7th as a rolling justification to overthrow Assad and invade Lebanon and get us to bomb the Houthis for a year and then ultimately get us into a ground war in Iran, which we're inevitably headed towards. You thought that too, didn't you? I'm sure they would have scoffed 50 years ago if you told them it would have went this far when Israel's trading land for peace and making a deal with the Egyptians. You probably would have scoffed back then if you were alive. So that is the big picture. That's what people are not maybe ready for, willing to grapple with. But that is the new century. When the Israelis said we're going to reset the regional order 50 years, that's what they meant. They meant everything is about to fundamentally change, and it is. And that is even what Netanyahu said today. In his speech, Netanyahu said, we will first become a regional power, and then that will make us a global power. That's obviously the goal by taking out Iran. He said, our Messiah won't come back next week, but he means he's coming back soon. And they're working toward that goal. That's why, as Tucker pointed out, they're wearing a Greater Israel patch on their arm, because it is about expanding Israeli territory, pushing their enemies geographically further back, and that means pushing them out of the West Bank and Gaza, pushing them out of the Sinai, pushing them out of the territory south of the Litani, maybe pushing into Jordan. And then once they create that buffer zone and destroy all their enemies' militaries, then they can begin work on the temple, the seat of the lawless man. That's the goal. That's obvious, isn't it? People say, well, we're already at war with Iran. What do you like, the mullahs? Mullahs? You don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. What is a mullah, you fucking stupid idiot? They say, well, as long as we're attacking the mullahs, what do you like, Islam? Islam. Give me a break. Islam. Who runs Hollywood? Who runs the media? Who runs banking? Who runs the government? Is it Muslims they're afraid to criticize? Then why, oh why, is Randy Fine in Congress? It's the Muslims everybody's afraid to criticize at the peril of their career, their livelihood, social standing. That's who we're afraid of? It's Muslims that will act like berserkers and lie about you and destroy your reputation or kill you if you go against them. It's them? Doesn't feel like it. Doesn't feel like it lately, actually. Muslims are just the instrument, and they will be brought here, and they will be radicalized, and they will be incited to attack us so that we will hate them, so that we will co-sign Israel's war, thinking there's a mutual benefit, and we will kill our empire to build Israel's. Our empire, and the MAGA movement is a tiny part of it, will be sacrificed on the altar. It will be burned up and destroyed in this attack so that we can build a foundation for a Jewish empire. And then when they are finished with us, they will wipe their hands clean and they will be done with us, and then we will be their slaves. That's the end game, obviously. We fought all these wars. We destroyed our peace dividend, our MAGA movement, our everything. It's all being burned up. We are the sacrificial lamb. We are the burnt offering. We are being destroyed so that they can create. And then when our country perishes, they will laugh. They will admonish us. They will say it is a curse from Hashem because we became anti-Semitic. We lost the Jews, so now we lost our secret sauce. That is what they will say. That is what they will say. When America crashes and burns, civil war, fire rains from the sky, whatever, they'll say, well, America became anti-Semitic. They abandoned Hashem. And that is why now they're being divinely punished. And it is just. They became Amalek, right? That's what they say. They say it all the time. What did Roseanne Barr say? She said, America will fall. That's literally what Roseanne Barr said. If America abandons the Jews, they will get what they deserve. America will fall. They hate us. These people hate us. They can't wait to see it. They're glad. They can't stand us. They tolerate us. You want to talk about tolerance? They tolerate us. They see us as stupid goyim, and they are just bearing and grinning. Grin and bear it as they gas up the goyim, no pun intended, telling them, hey, we're going to get mass deportations. Oh, we're going to support Trump. Good morning, we are going to win. Good morning, we are going to win. Good morning, we're going... You know, these fucking stupid idiots, they're grinning and bearing it, pretending to be friends with the goyim, waiting to kill us, lying in wait to rise and kill first. It's what it is. Now, what you do with this information, hey, whatever. Like, I would say don't give in to hatred, okay? Don't give in to hatred. Don't be like them. But that's what it is. And you get this Protestant goofus, LARPer, costume wearer, puffing on his pipe. I saw this show. I don't know the guy. Maybe he's a nice guy. I don't know him. But he watches a clip and he goes, so Nick thinks Iran should win the war? Isn't that not patriotic? Patriotic. You don't know the first thing about it. You don't know the meaning of the word. Patriotic. For this government, what's patriotic about this? How many dead Americans? How many paralyzed, permanently injured, maimed Americans from Iowa, from Florida, from Connecticut, from, you know, all these people that have now died and been injured in the conflict? Was it patriotic to send them to destroy our empire to build another? No, I don't think so. So yeah, I am rooting for Iran. You're right. You got me. Guilty as charged. I'm rooting for Iran because Iran is fighting them over there. They're on the front lines. It's their turn. Are you ready? And ask yourself, are you ready? Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They're willing to die for what they believe in. They're willing to die for their religion in defiance against Israel, against America. What would happen if Israel was bombing us like they're bombing Iran? Where would all of you be? Where the fuck would all of you be? You people that don't want to vote for a Democrat, you're going to get the vaccine because you don't want to lose your job. Where would you pussies be? Do you believe in anything? Huh? Honest to God, think about it. Think about it. They're not different than us. They're not different than us at all. They're human beings. Human beings slaughtered mercilessly, giving up their lives for their country, for their God, facing death bravely, filling the ranks, knowing they'll be struck down. Mojtaba Khamenei filling the seat of his father, knowing that he's almost certainly going to die, just like Hamas did, just like the other martyrs did. These are warriors. These are warriors that actually believe in their religion. These are warriors that actually believe in their cause, facing certain death defiantly. What about you guys? What about the fight over here? If Israel's dropping missiles on everybody, would you face death defiantly, or would you go running for the hills? Would you not want to be pictured next to the anti-Semite? Would you not want to get fired from your job? You know, there's a lesson in all this. You know, maybe in some sense, history belongs to those who fight. History belongs to those who care. The Jews care. When they fought for Israel, they had their fight. They were bold, daring, cruel, unscrupulous. You think about the things they've accomplished, you know, by way of deception. They were willing to fight. The Iranians are willing to fight and die. Are Americans, are we willing to do anything? Are we willing to do absolutely anything? That's the question everybody needs to ask. Are we going to make Instagram reels, reaction content? I don't know. The mullahs suck. Okay, buddy. But anyway, that's not a call for violence, by the way. I'm not saying to go. I don't actually think violence is called for in America, but you do need to rededicate yourself to the struggle. It's a very serious struggle against Jewish power. As Catholics, as Christ believers, okay, they're Muslims, we're Christians. As Americans, okay, you need to rededicate yourself to the struggle. And, you know, there's more than one way to give your life. Yeah, they give their lives in their way. We give our lives to the struggle day in, day out, trying to ascend the ladder, trying to wrest back control over the government And it's important. I think the greatest peril is that we become too much like the enemy. That might be the greatest peril. That might actually accelerate our defeat. And by that, I mean, if we turn to hatred and violence, and even if let's say we appoint some brutal dictator and that guy goes to war with Israel, I don't know that that's going to work. Okay? We got to be innocent and cunning. We have to be both. And it's very difficult. In some ways, it's easier. In some like orgy of ecstatic martyrdom, this big climax of battle or something. We have to give our entire lives to this, our whole mind, our whole soul, and for the right reasons, because it's right, because it's just. That's why we have to do it. We have to be absolutely dedicated. That's what it is. These are dark times. These are very dark times. Very dark, very ominous. And nobody feels good about it. So time to get a little bit serious. No, the mullahs are not the problem. If I hear you talking about Islam, you are a fucking goy, or you're a Jew. Or you're a Jew. Pretending to be goy. Okay, all right, but that's that. We're going to move on. We're going to take a look at our super chats. This is a long show. It's like a 2-hour monologue almost. But look, we are at war. We are at war. This is like Star Wars. And it's a bit convoluted. It's layered. There's the war, and then there's the war. There's a shadow war. There's a shadow war going on beneath the surface. It can't be seen. It is an unseen war. It's the secret war. It's a secret spiritual war. It is and I'm not joking, but I'm have a cheerful demeanor. It is a shadow conflict. And only until it is too late will the nature of it be revealed. And the reason I bring up Star Wars, because in Star Wars, it's like you have a battle between the Empire and the rebels. And ostensibly, people think it's all political, right? If you're in the Rebel Alliance, you're like, I don't like big government. I don't like being oppressed by this empire ruled from Coruscant. And if you're a pro-empire guy, you're like, these rebels are terrorists. Fuck them. I say crush them. Bring on the walkers. Bring on the AT-ATs. So everyone thinks it's political, but in reality, there's something religious happening. Who is the emperor of the empire? Well, it's not some political figure. It's like a demonic force. It is a demonic spiritual entity. And on the other side, who is fighting the battle for the rebels? It's the good guys in exile. It's another religious order. Not to get Reddit, okay? Not to gay it up and get Reddit, but I think about this all the time. It's exactly the same way. You think it's political. You think it's Republicans and Democrats. It's Americans in the third world or Americans in China. There's a political layer, but underneath the political is the spiritual. Hidden within, nested inside, is something intimate and spiritual and personal. And it's wizards, it's a religious order, and it matters how we fight also. In the same way, we can't give in to the dark side, just like in we can't be led by hate. Sounding cornier, but it's also true. Because if the demonic is influencing the power of Israel, the demonic feeds on hatred, the demonic feeds on wickedness, hardening your heart against God. So you may think you're fighting for the cause. You may think the ends justify the means, but you're only playing a part in an incomprehensibly complex plan that ultimately serves the devil. So it doesn't just matter, what we're fighting for, but it's also how we're fighting personally every day. So, these people that, the mullahs, they suck too. Well, I'm not a Democrat, all this kind of stuff. Well, that's not serious. Well, you're not being mature. Well, I don't know what that means, okay? What does that mean? It means I'm not OHGI. Like, what does that mean? He's not mature. Tell him how to act. He doesn't know how to act. I'm not an actor. I'm a human. That's what I do. Someone needs to get this guy in line. He doesn't know how to act. You're right. I'm not an actor. Anyway, that's my favorite. You ever see that Kanye? He's on Jimmy Kimmel and he goes, little kid thinks a coffee table. They say he doesn't know how to act. We're actors. So true. So true. The GOAT. Anyway, all right. Let's take a look at the super chats. This is real. This is real. This is why you watch the show. This is why you watch the show. This is what it's all about. All right. We are going to move on. It is true, though, okay? It is true. I've always felt it. I've always felt tapped in. You know, I don't think I just read the tea leaves. I think I am just like dialed in. Okay. I had a meeting with Candace and Charlie on the astral plane. It was me, Jeff, Charlie, Candace, and we all were hanging out on the astral plane discussing these events. No, but it's true. I've been dialed in from day one. I'm like Yoda. Remember when Yoda kind of knew? He always kind of knew. Because if you know the lore, it's like the dark side clouded the Jedi Council, so they didn't anticipate the resurgence of the Sith Order. But Yoda knew. Everybody else was too arrogant. Everybody else was too arrogant and stodgy, all the other Jedi, but Yoda was dialed in and he kind of knew. He sensed it. And that's like me. It's like I sense this. I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi. I sense the fall of the Republic. I feel it. I am dialed in like that. Anyway, not to nerd out a little bit, but that's true. So it's pretty freaky. I hope I'm wrong. I would be very relieved if like Israel was destroyed tomorrow and it's like, oh, I guess we have nothing to worry about. I'd be like, thank God. Like, honestly, that's a huge relief. Like, now I feel a lot better. Can I just get a vanilla latte and a cinnamon pull apart, please? Like, that would make me feel a lot better. Because this is deeply disconcerting. The signs are not good. It's very ominous. I wish I was wrong. If Iran won and this was all overblown and like Israel just chilled out and they're like, you know what? Never mind. We're not going to kill everybody. And Jews were totally innocent. I would be like, oh, you almost scared me. I'd be like, oh my God, you really had me going. I thought fire was about to fall from the sky and neither the innocent or the guilty would be spared. You really had me going there. I was freaking out. But I'm getting to be, Chicken Little. Sometimes Chicken Little knows what he's talking about. Not good. I wish I was wrong. But I fear that I'm right. And if I'm right, then we're all dead. But you know what makes you feel better? You start to think like the end of the world is upon us. The tribulation is imminent. We're all going to die. But then you remember, like, well, we're going to die anyway, like we're all going to die anyway. It's kind of the whole program. So I don't know if that's a big source of relief, but it's definitely like, well, it's like kind of one option here. You get what you get, right? You just got to live your life and be guided by conscience. That's all you can do. It's already over, Jesus saved the day. It's already over. We already won, okay? So just keep that in mind. They are an instrument. We are an instrument of God. We have to be an instrument of God. If death arrives, well, it comes for everybody. Eternal life is only guaranteed through Jesus. So That's how you have to think about it. Don't get too hung up on nationalism, race, anything, ideology, anything. I know that is not going to be popular, but it's just true. You know, because if you get too hung up, all these things will pass eventually.
Right. All right, man. As y'all can see, I was over here ready to respond, ready to go. Nick, bro. A lot of y'all may not like this one, but it is what it is. Doesn't matter to me. Nick understands that it's a spiritual battle. He understands that it's a religious battle, right? That's what I hear him saying. But it seems like he's not understanding how that same thing applied to other areas in which he discusses. Let's say when he's talking about colonizing Venezuela, taking advantage of their resources, taking from them, right? And we talked about this before. You can't just hide behind the Monroe Doctrine when it's convenient, but then also align with Christian principles as a white Christian nationalist, as he always reminds us that he is. Like, you can't, it seems like Nick picks and chooses when to apply these religious principles. It seems like he picks and chooses when to see this as, oh, this is a spiritual battle. Yes, this is a spiritual battle, and it's been going on for a very long time. It just didn't start with Judaism, or let me rephrase this. It just didn't start with what Israel's doing right now. Look at how America was founded. Nick likes to brag about the heritage of America and how America was founded, but America was founded on what principles? Manifest destiny, doctrine of discovery. We can go and do whatever we want to this group of people because they don't worship the same God as us. So perhaps when we say that this is a spiritual revolution that needs to occur, are we looking inwardly, or are we just looking outwardly and pointing the finger when it seems like it's something that doesn't align with our interest currently? But if everybody just has that mindset of how we evaluate a spiritual component or a religious component and how it impacts us and what we do with that religious component when it's convenient for us, when it aligns with our agenda, then we'll always end up in this position. It's easy for a lot of us, and we were talking about it on the show this morning. A lot of people can call out, oh, Israel's evil for doing this, and it's Jewish this, Jewish that. Bro, how was America founded? We justify all of these things based on how America was founded, right? How America was created, the foundation. It was founded on a lot of the same principles of people misusing religion, people doing things in God's name. And in my opinion, I know it's a little bit more extreme for people. How I embrace it is, I think that religion overall is gatekeeping our true relationship with spirituality. I think religion just creates division more so than creating unity under God, which obviously, if we believe that God is the creator, we're saying that God created everything. And I've said this over and over on videos, but the reason why I keep repeating it is because we seem to land in the same position. All of the things that are going on in this world largely are based on how we see the world, how we view what's righteous, what's not righteous, what principles we align with, what principles we don't. But we pick and choose what principles and when to apply them and give ourselves excuses when violating them if it suits our interests. And that's the same thing that Nick perhaps will accuse Israel of doing, and perhaps other people will accuse other groups of doing. But it's foundational when it comes to a spiritual revolution. But when you promote, as Nick sometimes promotes, might is right in this area, then what's the problem with Israel applying it? And if you don't have a problem with Israel applying it, and your only problem is, oh, well, my issue with Israel is the fact that they use American troops to do the things that they do. If they weren't sacrificing American troops, I wouldn't even care. Well, that's not biblical. That's not spiritual. That may be religious, depending on your interpretation, but I don't see that as being spiritual. That's not godly. So perhaps we need to back into this and figure out, like, where do we currently stand? How did we get to this position to where we're justifying these things? That's why I always talk about, like, war has to be outlawed. We can't have war. Once we justify war, people are always going to pick and choose and be able to rationalize why this group should take this and why they should be justified to take it by whatever means necessary and go back to that might versus right. Other people may not be looking at it from well, the Monroe Doctrine said that we can only violate people based on them being in our hemisphere. Like, bro, that's not an advanced way of thinking. That's not a spiritual way of thinking. So when Nick can properly identify, some of the things that he's mentioning when it comes to spirituality, bro, we got to look at how we play a role in this stuff. Nick acknowledges there's something religious happening, that it's a spiritual war. He referenced Star Trek or Star Wars, whatever it was. I never really watched those shows, so I'm not really familiar. But that's what's been going on forever, us fighting over religion, conquering in the name of religion, people violating God and using God to justify certain things that God would never justify himself. Not any God that I believe is worth worshiping. God is the all-knowing, all-being, right? So God doesn't need the grace that humans need because we fought, because we sin. Unless you're saying that God ain't God or that God isn't what we perceive God to be. So let's and this is what kind of gets me, and what ends up happening is, and it's all good, because people have said certain things about, hey, bro, you'll listen to a whole Nick show and then you'll focus on one area in which you had an issue with. Well, I mean, what do you want me to tell you? All the things that I agree with and just double down? Yeah, I'm going to tell you some of the things, and I do that as well. I do that as well in other instances. However, we're going to talk about what we finna talk about, what the things that stand out, the things that are radicalized, the contradictions, because it's largely the contradictions, even in humanity. When we look at society, largely we just disagree and focus more time on the 5% that we disagree on rather than the 95% or the 80% that we may agree on, right? And the other 15%, is my math right, that we're not sure about, that we don't truly have any strong feelings on. But it's usually that 5% that we're not realizing that we're playing a role in that separates a lot of us. So when it comes to this, you hear, and it's contradictions all over. Another contradiction, we'll go to a different one. When Nick always seems to mention that, in order to justify, in Iran, Iran's not a threat to me. I'm more threatened to get killed on a train. And he's referring to Irina, the lady, the Polish lady, I believe she was Polish, lady that was killed by the black guy on the train. And then he referenced, yeah, I'm more likely to get killed by a black guy or somebody black driving on the shoulder of the road. Well, actually, Nick, didn't somebody actually come to your house in real life and try to kill you? Didn't somebody come to your house that just killed 3 people that same day, come to your house with a gun and a bow and arrow or something like that? I notice how you never mention, you always talk about you're more likely to be killed by a black person and all this other stuff. But bro, somebody actually came to your crib. And guess what? It was a disaffected young white man. But we don't hear you talk about that. We don't hear you elevate that conversation. Why? Because most crime is committed against that type of people. Most black people do crime against black people. Most white people commit crime against white people. But when Nick says certain things that are more rhetoric based, you know what I'm saying? Based on the race rhetoric that he tries to use, it's pushing things in a more extreme way. It's confusing people, in my opinion. Now, y'all may be sitting here saying like he's only addressing these things because he's black. I don't care. You believe whatever you want to believe. I'm just calling out the contradiction, bro. I'm calling out you on one day you're trying to bring people together. The next day you're going back and saying things that you know are going to divide people. It's like, bro, we don't need to do all that. Now, that was a petty point, so I'll leave that there as far as what I saw him making it. I don't think that he was trying to, go too much into it, but this is where all the division is created. This is where a lot of this us versus them tribalism mentality is created. We were having a conversation earlier on the live show as far as how religion plays a role into all of these things or what the world has been turned into. And bro, this is just the crusades. Yes, people argue over religion, and usually it's the people that aren't actually religious who use religion to get whatever it is that they want to do. Because if you were truly a religious person based on the spiritual teachings of it, then I don't think that you would ever be trying to conquer somebody. Now, I guess that depends more so Old Testament, New Testament, people can argue that, but I don't think that if we take a step back and asked, God, ask him yourself, ask her yourself, however you look at it. I don't even want to get into that. But I don't think if we truly had a conversation with God, God would be complicit and be okay with a lot of the things that we push in the name of religion. So Uh, I just across the board, I think that we just need to reset. And I think the spiritual reset, that's the foundation, how we see each other. That's what I see as spirituality, how we see each other, how we engage with each other, how we connect to each other. That's the spiritual aspect. Then we want to take it a step further or perhaps dig a little bit deeper. It's not only how we engage with each other, but then it goes into nature. It goes, well, we're a part of nature. I know we try to always act like we're not a part of nature, but then it goes into how we interact with the rest of nature, right? The plants, the animals, all these different things. These are all spiritual components, but we tend to only fixate on the ones that benefit us in a selfish way when it's convenient and pushes our agenda. That's just how I see it. I may be completely wrong. And the reason why I always go back to this standpoint is because largely religion shapes the culture of how we view the world. Let's say if we just followed religion to the point where we thought that killing, and I know people will say, well, killing is different than murdering and all this other stuff. Well, yeah, well, the New Testament also pushes for us to turn the other cheek and that vengeance is only for God. So that argument doesn't stand. You can't pick and choose when you're trying to figure out what way to live life. And when it's convenient, reference the Old Testament. Then when it's convenient, reference the New Testament. They're polarizing different things. That was the whole point of having the New Testament, a new way of seeing life, of bringing life into a more peaceful place. But we have not truly embraced it. So when we look at the culture of us being okay with war, us being okay with killing, us being okay with all these things, what largely dictates culture? It's religion. So if we have a problem and we know that something impacts that problem, why would we not look into the thing that's making the largest impact on it in order to make some adjustments, or maybe to just see it from a different perspective? I'm not saying that you got to give up your religion. I'm not saying you have to do anything differently, but all I'm asking is if this is truly contributing to a lot of the chaos that we're experiencing, at least the culture of how we've adopted a religion, or the culture of how we've allowed certain people to take religion and misuse it. And then it creates a mindset of us to where we think this is just human nature, us just killing each other, which I don't, because as I said earlier on our live show, if you throw some kids in the sandbox, I don't think inherently, internally, their nature is to just kill each other. I think that they adapt to the world that we live in society. But the world that we live in, and the culture that we live in, I should say, is man-made. It's altered, it's evolved based on the things that man allows and doesn't allow. So we're just living during times of where certain things are just allowed. When it's allowed to kill millions of people, when it's allowed to kill hundreds of thousands of people, and you just have to justify it based on, I'm defending myself. I'm defending my nation. That's how we get exactly what we got today. Oh, yeah, we need to bomb Iran, and because we're defending ourselves against Iran, even though they didn't strike us, even though they didn't just strike Israel, but we still need to defend it. Why? Well, they've been saying that death to America for a while. So yeah. When we look at America, look at all of the killings. There's a study that we were talking about, I think we referenced maybe a couple of days ago with John Mearsheimer. I think it was a study from Brown University that was highlighting the amount of deaths that have been caused. I think it was either 1971 to 2021, but I believe it was actually mostly focused on post. Was it post? I think it was post 9/11, but let's just say it was 1971 to 2021. And it said that we've contributed to 38 million deaths, either indirectly or directly, with the things that America has done in other countries. We're a Christian-based country, killing that amount of people. And then I asked how many lives America has lost, either indirectly or directly, to wars. And it was significantly, like, the one was saying, I think like 7,000 or 10,000. And then there were even lower estimates. And then they were saying, let me actually go to the chat GPT real quick. Yeah, we looking at, y'all told me to go to Claude. Claude was acting up. But let me look up this real quickly because I have it on here. I just want to make sure that I'm getting all these wars correct, or these numbers correct, I should say. And then we'll go back to the notes, but it said estimated total of Americans killed, I believe this is civilians and military, indirectly and directly, was 11,000 to 13,000. But we over here killing millions. But we're a Christian-based society. So at what point is it okay to look at religion and to look at how we're doing religion, to look at how we're conducting spirituality and say, you know what? Nothing's off the table. We need to figure this out. Because Nick, on one end, you're pushing for peace, but it seems like it's very hard to push for peace and then to also push for this adopted way of looking at religion as we see it now. Now, a lot of people may not like what I'm saying, and I'm not saying, let me be very clear. What I'm saying is it's actually, I believe that it's disrespectful for people to use religion, to use God in ways that are ungodly. That's what I'm saying. If you're truly Christian and you really rock with that, call out some of this stuff with me. Nah, that's not what Jesus would be cool with. Let's call it out. But why did we decide to pick and choose, and why did we decide to be complicit in people violating our God, bro? So let me get to the notes. I don't even want to focus too much on that because the conversations that I've been having, it seems like they always go to that, but it's like, it's hard to not talk about religion when we're talking about people making certain decisions, and how they justify it is largely due to the culture that we just live in. So let's keep it moving. So, and one thing that Nick said when he was talking about, what's the kid, Brylan or something like that? Brylan Holland. I forget exactly what his name is, but it's funny that Nick said that he was probably along that path or going down that same path of being able to, you're in high school and then they're going to put you in front of the boomers to rile up the boomers and get them going. And he said that Brylan is the type of guy, he's the type of goyim that's going to flick on and off the lights at your body. Yo, come on, bro. And in a lot of ways, I mean, that's what Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz, that's how, if I was Jewish, that's how I'd be looking at them. Look at these peasants. They want to, they're useful idiots in a lot of ways, in my opinion. In my opinion, you may have a different opinion. You may think I'm a useful idiot. That's cool. That's cool. So Nick said that the U.S. is dropping thousands of bombs on Iran, causing an earthquake. Thousands of Iranians are dead. Hundreds of school children are dead. And what I think the U.S., I'm not even gonna say that the U.S. underestimated, maybe us as voters, civilians, citizens, maybe we underestimated it compared to the people that are in government. But I mean, when you start dropping bombs on people, are you surprised that the people actually unite? The people that maybe were divided, and chaotic, but then when you drop bombs on a school of girls and then you double tap it, it's like, yeah, people are going to start coming together. Hence 9/11, didn't we kind of do the same thing? All the people that were beefing, we decided to just say, you know what, we rocking with it. That's why George Bush's approval rating shot up. So when we look at what's happening over there, not only are we losing, but we're also losing on the front of a lot of those people are now seem to be having some sort of camaraderie that wasn't there, or uniting on the fact where it's like, hold up, man. Like, I know we want it to be free, but America, it seems like they sort of just trying to take advantage of our chaos. And then you start looking into it. Well, America with these sanctions perhaps caused a lot of this chaos. And perhaps this has always been the plan when it comes to America and a lot of other European countries, to create some chaos and act like you didn't, right? Throw a rock, hide your hand, and then slide in and act like you're the savior. That's what it seems to be. And people are seeing past that, especially, I mean, when you bomb a school of, little girls, like, what do you expect? What do you expect? So Trump can, and America and Pete Hegseth and everybody who still is on that MAGA train can act as if we're winning this war, can act as if there is a winner in this war, can act as if they're getting all the things that they said that they would get done before the war now, and declare victory. But nobody looking at this situation is looking at it like that. A matter of fact, it's like the bully that everybody thought was the biggest and baddest bully is now looking pretty, what we used to see as invincible is looking like, oh yeah, y'all ain't as solid as we thought. It almost, I remember, there'd be certain times where we'd be playing against certain teams, and let's say they have a running back, They got a running back that's supposed to be a dog or something like that. You know, he's supposed to be a real bully. And this happened in the league, in the league with certain running backs. Now, some of them were like a LeGarrette Blount, big boy, tough. But then there's others where, and even if they are tough, there's others in college that I went up against where the coaches would be acting like this player is something. And then all it takes is one of us on the team, one person, thump, usually like my dog Trenton or somebody like that. Shout out to my boy Jay Trenton. But all it takes is you got one kid on the team. This happened with my boy Money Mike. I'll rest in peace, Mike, Money Mike. But yeah, I remember in practice, we had a kid that was he was a freshman coming in, and he was like 230, 240, playing running back, fast, cut up, big, everything, solid. And everybody was looking like, bro, he's a tank. Like, he gonna be, as soon as we start, practice in the summer, you go against each other, against your team, and you tackling all that stuff. I remember one time my boy Money came down and just boom, rocked him, dude on the ground. And after that play, it's like, not that we lost respect for the running back, but it's just like, oh yeah, he could get touched too. That's what's happened to America. Sorry for the long, y'all know I throw the analogies in there. I love the sports analogies. And sometimes I got to remind y'all what it is that, y'all think that I'm just some type of streamer. Like, yeah, we were in the field too. Like, let me stop. But yeah, so America has had this aura. And if anything, the aura of America has declined and the aura of Iran has improved. Yeah, like you see the energy of the foreign minister from that interview that he did with NBC. Yeah, we're waiting for America to bring ground troops. Now it looks like we won't be bringing ground troops. Who knows? I don't know how it's going to escalate. We don't know. But it seems like the tune of America has changed. Perhaps even the tune of Israel has changed to a certain point. I know Nick was talking about Bibi Netanyahu sometime. Well, maybe we won't get a regime change. We don't know if we're going to get a regime change. The tune has changed. The new Ayatollah, and I think there were reports of something happening to him. Even if there wasn't, what was the response from the foreign minister? We're not dealing with Americans here. Now, a lot of people may hear that and think I'm saying, no, yeah, these people are savages. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that Americans have been real comfy. We live in a lot of comfort, and we're going up against a group of people that do not live in comfort. They can't afford to live in comfort. They don't have the privilege, perhaps, that Americans have, not being in war, right? The fortune that we have of not being in a lot of these wars not touching America the way that these wars are fought in these other countries. Those people are brought up in it with a different cultural mindset. We're brought up thinking that we're the bullies, and the majority of us will never engage in any type of war or anything else. They're not raised like that. They're tested. They're tried and tested in ways that we're not. They out of fear, out of threats, they have to prepare. Their lives are totally different than ours. So therefore, when somebody, what did the Iranian prime minister or foreign minister say when he got pressed by the NBC interviewer? And he said, well, you lost your Ayatollah's dead. A lot of your leadership's gone. Everybody's dead. Like, why do you think that you're not losing the war? He said, yeah, and everybody was replaced. And things are running just as they were before. What's the problem? Y'all came in here for a regime change. You destroyed the entire regime, okay, the leadership, and we replaced it in what, a couple days, a week? Can y'all keep going? Because we're good. They asked him if he wanted to talk about a ceasefire, peace treaty. He's like, why? Like, we're not reaching out for that. Why would we? We were in talks and y'all violated it anyway, so why would we trust it in the first place? But we're not running to y'all saying stop. We're not. It's like a game of chicken. Okay, we'll see who says it first. We'll see who taps out first. They're not flinching. We are. Because this is a war that we should never have been in. It's a war that we didn't have the backing and support of a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans did not want this. So now we can't afford to have a draft, have more of our Americans killed, because they're built for that. They expect their culture is different. You heard what the new Ayatollah said when he's talking about martyrdom and all these things. They're prepared for things that Americans, I'm talking about us, the civilians, The ones just living in apartment buildings, just, living life, going out on Friday. We're not built for what they're built for. And we don't support it anyway. The longer we stay in Iran, our support is going to go down. The longer that we keep bombing Iran, their public support is going to go up. The only thing that would get us to support certain things moving forward with, continuing this war with Iran is an attack on American soil. Maybe that's why all of a sudden now they're having reports say that, oh yeah, there may be an Iranian drone attack in California. It's like, come on now. Now, if it happens, do you even believe that it was Iran? It's like, would you even believe it? Like Iran would have to, like, even if Iran just came out and said that was us, it would be hard for me to, I'd still question, like, It's like they would have to, like, you got to show me, because at this point, it's like, is it a false flag? Is this a pretext? It's like all these different things. Like, we just don't believe it. We don't believe it. We're not for it. We don't want it. Yo, get up out of there. It's not doing us any. All you're doing is, and it's a shame that it gets to the point where people now don't want it. And it seems like it's because, well, gas prices are up. Bro, people are dying. Forget the gas prices. People are dying. We're killing people. People are killing us. And just because we kill a lot more than them, than they kill of us, does not mean that it's justified or any more righteous than it would be if the numbers were reversed. On the reverse sides, if more of us were dying compared to them, it's wrong, bro. It's ungodly. Let's so Nick was talking about, with the Iranians not being his enemy, and I get all this. This is the same thing we talked about on the live show today with Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, he got convicted, sentenced to 5 years in prison. I think it was like a $10,000 fine. Lost his boxing license. Couldn't make money in America, couldn't go outside and make money, just because he didn't want to fight the Vietnam folk. His conscience wouldn't allow him. Now, he appealed it and ended up winning. The Supreme Court turned it over and said that them charging him was a violation of some conscientious something. But he lost his prime, and it's like, what are we willing to pay for peace? All these wars that occur, they would not occur unless the people in power get us, and I'm not even saying us because I've never enlisted in the army, but they get the pawns, the peasants, whether you fight or not, to either buy into the war or to go out there and actually execute people. They wouldn't be allowed to do the things that they're doing. They wouldn't be able. What do we think? They're going to put their lives on the line? We think they're going to go to Iran? We think Trump's going to send his family? We think Lindsey Graham's going to send his family? Go front line something then. That should be the rule. You vote to go to war. You got to send some of your people on the front lines, not just in the background or doing certain jobs where you're not at risk. No, go front line something if you really believe in it. If you're willing to send other people's kids and other people to go front line to fight, and you're voting for us to go to war, then you should be able to send yours as well. So, and I think we finished up with, Nick mentioning, how we get finessed and manipulated into seeing Muslims a certain type of way, and how they try to push all this propaganda. They've been doing this ever since 9/11 in order to justify us killing Arabs, us killing brown people. That's what it comes down to. They've been doing this. And then you sit back and wonder, and this is what Nick was saying as far as why he wants Iran to win. I don't want anybody killed. I don't think there is a winner, just like the foreign minister of Iran said. But Nick says that he wants Iran to win this conflict, which would just be being successful in defending themselves against America and Israel at this point. But he made some good points, some valid points that we got to look at. Why is Iran considered our enemy? And this is the same argument that I make when Nick is throwing out those wing half shirts. And a lot of y'all, I get it. Yeah, I've been going at Nick today. Y'all feel that way. But I'm just drawing the connections here. The same way that Nick can successfully call out, or rightfully so, in my opinion, call out and say, why is Iran our enemy? Are they controlling Hollywood? Are they controlling our government? Are they the ones that are controlling our politicians based on lobbying? Are they controlling a lot of the social media, the agenda, the culture of what America is? All these things that these quote unquote conservatives don't like, don't stand, can't stand. Are they pushing that? We just saw a video of this black transgender coming out talking about this is why we got to protect Israel and we got to guard against anti-Semitism because Israel founded transgenderism or contributed to it or studied. It's like, what? It's like, is that a positive or like when it comes to conservatives? Is that y'all culture or is y'all culture more aligned with Islamic principles? I'm just asking. I'm just asking. And I think these are the things that Nick was rightfully so asking. But you get put against certain groups. This is the same thing that I said with Nick. Why you got these Wang Half t-shirts on? Why you always saying the N-word but offending black people or saying a word that you believe is derogatory towards black people? You say that you're doing it for free speech and you're against censorship, then why use the black term? Why not use the term of the people that canceled you at 18, the people that you've been going up against, the people that you are still trying to convince is our number one enemy? You get what I'm saying? Why do we pick and choose our battles with certain groups and try to justify it for whatever means that I don't think are justifiable? So people may think that I reached with that one. That's cool. It is what it is. But yeah, so Nick even mentioned certain things about, who dislikes us more. He even mentioned, that the Israelis are trying to, I don't know if he said this about Israel or he mentioned something about certain people trying to kill us. I don't, just me, I'm just speaking. I don't think that, maybe this is a naive comment and I haven't really processed it, but as I heard him say that, it was kind of like, well, I don't know if they trying to kill us, more so just using us and seeing us as indispensable when it comes to pushing for their agenda. Like Bibi Netanyahu coming, like Bibi Netanyahu coming and campaigning that we should go to war with Saddam and Iraq and Israel not sending any troops during that war. It's like, so you're cool with us fighting your battles or us engaging in what's going on right now? Seems like, why are we having Americans die because certain things that y'all want? I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't know of any Arab countries that are forcing us, or having Americans die on their behalf to push their agenda, whatever that may be, to grow your real estate, grow your land, or whatever else. I know there are other reasons that you justify it, defending, Israel, whatever it may be. Damn, this is why nobody likes me, bro. Y'all may not like me, but y'all love me low key. Y'all love me low key, and all of y'all are my brothers, my spiritual brothers. So let's go back to what we started off as. This is a spiritual concern. We need a spiritual revolution. And like I said, all of y'all are me. It goes back to the Rasta way, I and I. It's not like we've said it before. It's not you and me. It's not us and them. It's I and I. We all in this together. We got to figure out how to live in this world and leave it in a better place for our next generations, because all this war is just going to lead to destruction. And who knows when God will decide to flood the planet because of our actions. How selfish is that? We're not going to give future generations the opportunity that we had because we want to argue and bicker instead of moving towards peace. So that's all I got for y'all today. So as always, like, subscribe. Appreciate y'all. Turn your notifications on. Got to remind us. That's word to big bro Robert, who always does remind us to control the algorithm and not let the algorithm control us. So on that note, let me know where I'm wrong. I know my bias may, create some blind spots for me. I'm assuming that a lot of y'all may choose to let me know where I'm wrong on this one whenever I push back against certain things with Nick. There's always a few of y'all there, but it is what it is. I welcome the conversation. I welcome the conversation and respectful dialogue. And for the most part, it actually always is. Even if there's pushback, it tends to be very respectful. So, yeah, that's how I would rather keep it, because, look, I may be wrong. Cool. But, I'm willing to share my opinion with y'all publicly, because I don't think that I'm wrong. I hope that I'm pushing us in a more positive place. But if I am wrong and I am pushing us and I am influencing to, maybe not to Nick's degree, but, hey, we're all influencing somebody, then I don't want to be misleading people or influence people in a bad way, whether it's influencing one person or whether it's influencing a million. So On that note, I shall see y'all soon. You. TB, GI, TC. It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a nigga on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there. Let's figure out a split that's honorable and fair. Tell me where you trying to take it. Bro, I'll meet you there. 1600 Penn, Wash, DC. Swear I saw the vision riding through the DMV. I envision prayers, but I could do VP. Hillbilly, L&G, fuck, I look like JD. Shout out my cheat code, Dave and Karen raised me. And my big bro, a nuclear family.
And they don't like that. Strong fathers in the crib, BLM fought that. LBJ society created all that. Victimhood mentality, I can't embrace that. And everything they taught in school, assume it's all cap. Everything I said I'd be, I am that. Everything I said I'd be, I am that. Everything I said I'd be, I am that. Ain't no introduction, just some fun facts. In case you were wondering, I am Dak.
I know you heard me hit it 3 times for Dr. Umar. Shout out to Umar, man. We ain't kicking nobody when they down. And shout out to everybody that continues to show love, support, appreciating the message that I'm giving y'all along with the bro Nick's message. We gonna keep pushing, man. And shout out to the haters too, cause y'all in the comments heavy too. y'all the ones that gave me the inspiration to create this song. They kept saying like, who's the random black guy in the corner? I am.